Okay, welcome back to the Reddit review series. I kind of missed a few days. I've been busy. I've been setting up some stuff in the back end in my own life, stuff that doesn't really matter. Anyway, today we have a bronze Moira player. They haven't really put a lot of like information in the post, so I'm not gonna bother reading it. I'm just gonna go for the game and just see what's going on. Try and help you out here. Now, with Moira, the general goal you've got two things. You want to try and do as much damage as possible, which is going to lead up to a kill. How are you going to do that? Obviously you're going to do damage, and we're going to try and off angle as much as possible. Why can we do that? Because we're playing Moira, which is very good survivability and movement. Right, she has a fade and her orb to help her win and exit 1v1s. And then obviously our second objective is, because we're playing support, we have to heal people. We have to make sure they don't die. So right now we're low-key AFK. What? Okay. A small explanation of how Overwatch works. Overwatch maps are, they are things that people walk on. And when people walk forward, they're taking something called space. And what space is basically, so imagine no one's on the map. Space is just, where can you move? Can you move through here? Okay, this is space, but your space is going to be where your teammates are playing. So right now, you don't have a lot of space. You only have basically this square of space because your sojourn is only here. But they are actually going to be walking up more forward than your team. And yes, they're taking the same amount of space, but because they have more players closer to the point, they're going to be able to push your sojourn out, and then they're going to be able to take all of this space because there's not contesting it. So you need to be moving forward as quick as possible to the objective or whatever fight starts, so that we can get to shooting people. But I won't go too in depth for that because space is a very kind of complicated concept there. Okay, nice orb. Okay, we're healing, we're healing. Okay, cool. So your teammates killed too, but is that because you did anything? Not really. And like, I'm liking the damage here. Good damage. Healing the area so much she's healing. Good fade as well. Makes sense for that. Unlucky. Let's see what happens here. So we're shooting. So yeah, when we get put in danger, we want to fade away. You can do a jump, by the way. So at the end of fade, let me show you. So when you fade, you can do a jump to give yourself more momentum to get out. So instead of being here, you probably could have gotten behind this wall and then behind the cover. Now the reason why you lost this fight is because you didn't do enough damage at the start of the fight. If I rewind, your teammates were able to kill two, right? Reaper killed Pharah, and then your Sojourn was able to kill the Mercy. But that's not because of you, because you're kind of in the back, we're healing, we're not doing damage. It's kind of your job as Moira to kind of try and open up an angle. Now you can go from here and maybe fade over here if you want to do damage but safely, or if you want to fade over here, it's a bit of an aggressive position, but can you see how fading over here would put you in a position where the enemies have to look either this way or this way? They don't get to just all look over here. And this is going to help your teammates get more kills, because if the enemies are looking at you and not your team, well, then you're going to be able to win the fight. Now, realistically, in a 5v3, you should be able to win this really easily. But you can kind of see what happens, right? Because you're not doing any damage, the Junk and the Ram are able to just only shoot the Orisa because there's no one else actually shooting them. Whereas you could have been on the left over here shooting the Junk, and then you're bringing the Junk's attention to you. And then, like, I'll just show you, right? Because you're not really shooting anyone, the Juno's able to shoot the Soj, the Junkrat's able to look at the Reaper, the Ram's able to shoot the Orisa. In a 5v3, you have more damage, you have more resources. So this should be an easy win. And I'll just show you. Like, yes, we're doing damage to the Ram now, but at this point in the fight, because there's chaos, we need to be ideally going for someone more killable, like the Junkrat or the Juno. And this is where I wouldn't be against you using your fade to kind of just go in on the Juno or the Junk, as long as you don't fade in their face. Like, I wouldn't be against you just fading to get over here just so you can reach this guy. Now, let's see how the rest of the fight went out in third person. So, I don't know how Mercy's dying there. It's unfortunate. But again, none of these people would be dying if you were shooting. And you are shooting, just you're shooting the ram, which doesn't really do anything. It doesn't help. Junkrat killed 2 people because you weren't shooting him. Do you understand? Now, should they be dead to the Junkrat? Probably not. He low-key shit on your teammates. But he wouldn't have had the chance to if he was distracted by you. Now, I'm gonna stop talking about that. Because I hope it's easy to understand now. See, like, this fade is on paper a good fade, but in practicality, it's too late because your teammates are already dead, or like a couple of them are. Yorissa's about to die, which means you've already lost the fight. If you did this earlier, when the Junk was shooting the Mercy and these guys over here, you probably would have won this fight. But like, I don't want to overload you with information. I want you to understand why doing damage is important for actually winning. Okay, well, you lucky got shit on. Now, this is the caveat to this, where you probably don't want to fade to an angle too fast because your team hasn't actually got to the fight yet and they haven't started fighting. This fade is too early because you see how far back your team is. No one is actually able to put any pressure on these guys to pull their attention in here, and then you can go on the left. Here, you just went a little early. If you waited for the Orisa and the Sojourn to go in, you see that all of these guys are distracted, right? You see how the Junk's looking. You see how the Mercy's on the Junk. You see how all these guys are looking this way. If you faded now over here, or just walked over here now, a couple seconds later, you would have had a free angle to yourself and you would have been able to do damage. And then, like I said before, you would have been able to, you know, get people low with damage orb, make people look at you, and then you have the opportunity to fade out once they look. So, like you have the right idea, you just did it too early. And I think I already said this, but how do you know if your teammates are actually distracting and going in? Well, there's 2 things. One, you have visual cues. In Overwatch, you can see your teammates through walls, so you can see that they're not out here anymore. You can see they're walking in here. And then based on just how people fight and where people stand because of the objective, you know the enemies are going to roughly be around this area looking this way. So that visual cue, the teammates going in, is going to tell you, okay, the enemies are going to be distracted. And then number 2, you have audio cues. If your teammates are shooting, if the enemies are shooting, if you can hear certain cooldowns being used, like for example, the concussion mine has a sound, the speed ring has a sound, Nemesis form has a sound, Pharaoh's cooldowns have sound, right? If you can hear these sounds, you can assume that people are fighting, and then you can take the angle. Go, fading in. You try to heal up the Mercy, it's fine. But like here, you see how now it probably wouldn't have mattered because you were kind of lost anyway. You see how you weren't shooting, so the Ram had nothing to worry about. In this hypothetical scenario, the Ram only had to focus on Sojourn because there was no one else shooting him. Yeah, I mean a bit greedy for the kill, but I understand it. It's okay. So, can you see the importance of actually doing consistent damage and then taking an angle in the middle of the fight to pull people's attention away from your team? Nice damage orb. One thing I'd just like to say with a damage orb is just like actually make sure it's gonna ricochet back and forth where people are actually standing, because this isn't gonna get a lot of value. So how could you do a better damage orb? Well, I'll show you. So instead of throwing it in there, because this is gonna send it into that little room, just send it over here because it's gonna go through, hit the Junkrat, and then it's gonna bounce back. And if you angle it right, it can actually bounce, obviously, in between this wall, and then it'll go bing, 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 and then it'll make this area just annoying to play. But you see, right now, we're not doing damage, so you're technically in a 5v3 because obviously you have a Mercy, right? So you're in a 5v or a 5v4, you know, whatever, right? Their team has 1, 2, where is the other guy? So their team has 1, 2, 3, 4 people shooting. Your team only has 1, 2, 3 shooting. Do you see how their pressure is going to outdo your team's pressure? And then they're going to have their cooldowns forced. They're going to have to back up. And then it's going to be hard to win. So what do you think you should do to kind of help put up pressure. Yeah, you gotta do damage yourself. Now, where you do it from doesn't really matter at this point because the fight's already started, right? Your Sojourn's committed overclock, so yeah, you could stand here and do damage, but because your Sojourn has popped overclock, she's kind of a deadly target right now. So guess who people are going to look at? The Sojourn. This guy, and this guy are going to be paying attention to the Sojourn. So what can you do? Well, if they're all looking kind of this way, you can wrap around the left side, maybe entirely ignore the ram because he's not very killable, and then you could go for the Mercy, because what this is going to do is if you're over here and you start shooting Mercy, you throw a damage orb out, the Mercy is going to have to get out, and then the ram is not going to have the damage boost or the healing from the Mercy, and then he's going to have less resources than your team. And because of that, he's going to take a bunch of damage, and then he's going to have to back up. And then you've kind of secured that space, right? Remember what I said earlier about space? So your team has kind of this space. Like, they have kind of this, because you're standing here. Their team has kind of this space. But if you go over here, you shoot the Mercy, the ram takes a bunch of damage, he has to back up. Well, you've now made him give up space, which means you have the objective, and then as they keep backing up, you can do more damage. I really hope that doesn't confuse you. But you see how they're able to just walk in for free because you're not doing any damage, and then like the fate of the fight is kind of just up to it. I can't speak today. It's just up to if your teammates do something. Now lucky for you, your teammates are doing stuff. This is a good play. It's a little risky because you're fading in and you don't really know exactly what's going on, but it's a good play. Why? Because it's in the middle of the fight. You go on an off angle, and an off angle is just like another point of pressure where the enemies aren't. I'm gonna crash out. It's just another angle where the enemies aren't looking right. So look, the Pharah is looking over here. You were over here, so it wouldn't be very surprising. So then you fade over here and you catch her off guard on the left side. Now, why do we want to catch people off guard? For two main reasons. Because number one, shooting someone who isn't looking at us makes it very easy to kill them, as you've just demonstrated here. Why? Because if they're not looking at you, they're not shooting back at you, which means you can just shoot and use all of your cooldowns for free. But the second reason as to why the specific act of going on an off angle is important is because, let's say you fade over here, right? You fade, you shoot, and then let's say the Pharah stops looking at your team and now looks at you. What happens is that you've pulled the Pharah's attention away from your team and onto you, and then in a better situation you would have your fade, right? But in this situation, Pharah looks, and then when she starts getting you low, if you think you're gonna die, and usually you just get out when they look at you, well then you could just fade out, and now you've distracted the Pharah away from your team, and then that would allow the Sojourn to shoot her. So this is kind of the second part of doing damage. You want to do damage at the start of the fight. It doesn't really matter where you are. And then as the fight kind of begins, like you did earlier, you can fade in, walk in. I recommend walking. And then you can just shoot people. Here, you can just pop coal. I wouldn't be against it. Nice. Good job. Go for the Juno. Nice. Good fight. See, you actually did stuff that fight, which is why it was kind of easy to win. Now, I could lecture you about walking up and trying to throw damage orbs and trying to do damage before the fight, but we need to work on some, other things before that. But just to warn you, players in higher ranks, let's say you lost this fight and you're trying to come back from spawn. In higher ranks, the enemies aren't going to sit on the point because that's going to give you free space to walk forward. So what they're going to do is the enemies are going to, set up over here, set up over here, set up over here. They're going to take more space, which means they're going to be able to shoot you earlier, and it's going to be harder for you to come back to the point. And like you can do the same thing, because now look, I'll show you exactly what's happening. You see how these guys are just able to walk forward for free? These guys should not be going from this point. Can you see my mouse? They shouldn't be able to go from over here all the way to over here for free, because better players would have been putting on a bunch of pressure. But I don't want to talk about that too much because it's not advanced, but we just have like we have bigger problems right now. And like you see how, you know, you don't really have any impact in the fight if we're not shooting. Right? We just have no impact there. Just no shooting. Ideally, we just need to do damage. That's it. Instead of letting them come to us, like we should really be over here already, you know, throwing damage orbs, doing damage, making it hard for them to walk in. But okay, I already spoke about that. Because like, you see how hard it is to like win the fight because your teammates are just dead. It's because of you, and it's not because you're not healing. You're clearly healing. I'm watching it. It's because you're not doing damage. And just as an example, you see how everyone turns around to look at you. Imagine if your team was here, right, and your whole team was here. You faded over here. Everyone just turns around to look at you. What's that going to do for your team? Well, now they can just walk forward and kill people for free because no one's looking at them. This is what you should be doing in the middle of the fight, not now because, well, as you can see, you don't have a lot of people, and you're probably gonna die. Yeah. So again, we just went in too early. You did the same thing on the first point. You just went in a little bit too early. So again, we need to look at our teammates. You see how we're actually close to shooting people. Now, as the fight starts in a couple of seconds, that's when we can take a new angle. Okay, that's great. You didn't really have any part in that fight. Unlucky. You just got a little greedy there, fading in. Right, like you didn't really have an idea. See here, you didn't need to use fade. The reason why you would fade in is simply because you see someone who is killable. But right now, there's no reason to fade. Like you don't know where anyone is, so you may as well just walk forward and try and shoot who you can. There's no point fading. Fade has two uses. Either most commonly you're going to use it to get out of a bad spot, or in some cases, like on that Pharaoh, you're going to use it to go in when you see an opportunity to, and it's relatively safe. Here, there was neither, because there was no one to shoot, and you weren't getting out, so now you're in open space, and the Pharaoh is able to kill you very easily. Now, you get raised, which is nice, and now we just go to the next point. Okay. We can throw a damage orb here, nice. Yeah, with a damage orb, you basically just want to throw it as often as possible. Just make sure it's actually bouncing around and hitting people. I haven't really talked too much about cooldown usage, ult usage, just because fundamentally your problem is that you're just not shooting enough and you're not doing enough damage. And sometimes you fade in. Okay, nice damage orb. That might kill the Pharaoh. Ah, nice. Just a little tip. Because Overwatch players want to get to safety, right? That you kind of understand, okay, the Pharaoh's going to go over here because she wants to get to safety, and it's the most common and default path to get to safety. So using that information, you can kind of, instead of throwing the orb where she currently is, because you know she's going to move, think about where's she going to go, and then try and cut her off. You know, maybe fade over here, and then send an orb this way, because it's going to intercept the Pharaoh as she flies over here. But that's just a small thing. It's more like It's a more micro-mechanical thing. Here, you see how they're just able to surround us. It's because we're not shooting, right? We're not going somewhere and forcing out the angle. We could go over here, try and shoot Junko a bit, because that means we're going to be contesting the angle, and he's not going to be able to shoot here for free. You see how he can shoot here for free because no one's looking? If you came over here, you know, I'm not saying get in his face, but I'm saying, you know, fade over here, get to the wall, shoot, right? The Junkrat now has to deal with you, and if he doesn't, you're just going to kill him for free. Right, let's speed through this. Can we fade out because we get low? This is fine. I like the idea, but just try and get it in the room. Okay. We need to make sure to fade out. Nice. We could pop ult here. The reason why I'm saying you want to pop ult is, well, I mean, you can clearly see that enemies are fighting. Like I said earlier, if people are using cooldowns and you can see and hear them fighting your team, you can fight. And in this situation, you can amplify your damage by just popping the ult here. There's like basically no reason not to. Your soldier's low, enemies are in front of you, and they're not paying attention. You know, you can just pop ult. Nice. Kill her. Keep up the Mercy. Kill the Junk. Keep up the Surge. Nice. And you see how, as soon as you actually do damage, the game is just so easy to win. Or the fight is easy to win. Now, yes, granted, you had ult, but I'd gander and say that you could probably do the same exact thing with your normal damage. Now, again, I don't want to talk about it too much, but high ranked players, if you watch a high ranked player, you know, even in like diamond or plat, right, you're gonna see teams are gonna get off the point and take more space. Right? They're going to take more space and they're going to make it hard for these guys to walk through this space. Now, okay, what does space actually do? Well, just having more space just means that the enemies have to use more cooldowns. They have to shoot you more. They have to use more resources to force you out of this space. So enemies are trying to walk up here. Not only are they getting shot at and they have to protect themselves and get healed and use cooldowns just to walk through here as your team is playing here, but they also have to force you out using more resources just to make your team go from this space to over here to point, right? And then in this whole kind of I'm trying to figure the word. In this whole like moment of fighting here, you could win a fight and then get more percent without even having to fight for the objective, right? Because you see how the enemies are just walking up for free? This would never happen in a high rank. I promise you, this would never happen. Another bad reason, or another reason why just staying on the point is bad is pay attention to the DPS. Where do the DPS go compared to the RAM? I want you to pay attention, right? Where do the DPS go? Because they're not going down the main choke with RAM. They're going on the left side. They're going on the right side. Another reason why being on the point is bad is because it allows the enemies to take angles and lanes, which is another concept. They're able to take angles, which means by the time the fight starts, they're gonna have really good positions to shoot your team from, and then guess what? It's gonna force your team to either walk forward to avoid these angles and then walk into the ram, or walk backwards so far that they're not going to be able to help the Orisa. Now, lanes in Overwatch, it's kind of like a map theory thing, where every map has pieces of it where there's multiple lanes. Right here is one of them. So this is the first lane. The big lane where like the point is, this is what is going to be called main, because your team is here. It's not a fixed thing. This is like the mid lane, the main lane, because this is where most people are playing. But then there's going to have the two side lanes over here, which you can use to walk around the middle lane and get behind them or get on the side, right? We have this lane on the right and then this lane on the left. You not holding, oh shit, I pressed the wrong button. You not holding this corner has allowed them to walk into this room, Can you see that, right? Because you've let them walk through this ramp for free, you've now opened up the lanes for them, which is going to make them be able to take off angles more easily. Now, your Orisa just shit on that tile. Again, here, we're just not doing damage, Like we're not an active participant of the fight. We're doing nothing. Heal up. I'm pretty sure, right? We actually didn't do a single bit of damage this whole fight. I'm actually pretty sure. So, let me look. You're on 3,300. Now, let's get to the end of the fight. Alright, so Ram's dead, Mercy's dead. Okay, Farah's dead, she killed herself. Okay, if I click the scoreboard and I see no damage, I'm gonna have a problem. We didn't do a single bit of damage. So can you see how you weren't actually impactful in that fight and you weren't actually like there? You genuinely, other than like a couple of heal orbs, you genuinely could have just been in spawn. And you would have gotten the same amount of A. But we won the point, so cool. Now, I can't even see where the point is, but I'm going to assume it's over there because you can see the enemies walking. Now, I'm not going to explain what I've just explained because, like, what I talked about earlier is basically your main problem. You need to shoot more, you need to do more damage, you need to stop going in early on your own, and you need to take off angles in the middle of the fight. Those are, like, the three main things. Okay. And also, as a Moira specific thing, because you're not doing any damage, well, then you're going to run out of healing resource. Because when you do damage, it refills your healing resource. Now, normally, a higher rank Moira player never has to think about running out of resource because they're always doing damage. But you have to worry about it because you're not actually shooting the enemies, right? Like you now actually can't do anything because you're not doing damage. So the game is almost encouraging you to shoot the enemies and use your damage orb because doing damage gives you resource, right? You see how you're literally doing nothing. You're doing nothing. You're not doing damage. You're not flanking. You're not going on the right lane or the left lane to try and catch someone off guard. Like I said, with an off angle, you're doing nothing. No damage, no healing because we're doing no damage, which means we don't have any resource, right? If we went on the right lane, by the way, this is the mid lane, right, the main lane, because this is where the most people are. If we went on the right lane, we could help the Bastion. If we went on the left lane, we might have to fight Junkrat if we go too late. But if we go on the left lane, well, then we can catch the Pharah off guard. We can catch the Mercy off guard. We can catch the Ram off guard. But we don't because we're just doing nothing. Now, this is good. This is, by the way, that's like the first piece of damage you've done in 2 minutes. And it's because the enemy walked into you and not the other way around. Now, that's kind of unfortunate, but you had Fade and you could have gotten out, right? You see how this is actually a good fight for you to take? Because, yeah, it's kind of dangerous, but you can just fade out, right? As soon as you see that nade, which somehow didn't hold on a minute. Oh, you dodged it. Okay. Nope. Like, what? That goes in you? Wait, this game is disgusting. Anyway, when this fight goes bad, you can just, oh, fade out. I don't want to fight you anymore. And then, you know, you can fade over here, help Mercy, and stuff like that. But to be honest, you have more damage than I thought a bronze player would have. So this is good. We're shooting. Okay, now that cooldowns are being used, now that the fight started, I'm not saying you necessarily have to move in this situation just because, you know, everyone is already distracted. But in this situation, right, just as an example, the Ram is looking at the Sojourn here, which means maybe you could shoot the Ram or you can shoot the Pharah because she's skillable. Why? Because you off-angled her. Because initially you were playing on this angle and the Pharah kind of knew you were there. And then you kind of surprised her technically. She dropped in front of you, but she wasn't paying attention to you, right? So then you were easily able to kill her. And then that way you actually had value in the fight. And now we're going back to healing. I mean, like, we kind of have to, right? So it's whatever. Okay, they cap, you lose. So yeah, do you understand how losing that point is basically your fault? Because you just sat, like, in the first half of it, you sat in the back doing no healing and no damage. You did no damage because you just weren't doing damage. And you couldn't even do any healing as well because you weren't doing damage to refill your bar. Okay, keep up Soj. You see how I haven't, like, said anything about, you know, bad healing? Because, like, all you're doing is healing. So, obviously, people are going to, you know, be at full health when they need to be. But because you're not doing any damage, it makes it really hard to win the fight. And honestly, I've never seen a person run out of healing meter so much. And here, right? Your team has won the fight. You can see Junkrat and you can probably hear Junkrat on the right. Chase him. I'm not saying fade onto him because it's kind of risky. He can one-tap you. But I'm saying turn to the right, shoot at him, make him look at you and not your teammates, right? Because look, if you started walking on him, he would have to turn from here to here, and then your teammates would also be able to not get shot by Junk as well, right? But here, like, you're just letting him get free damage because you're just not shooting, and he's able to get away. Again, this is where we would want to do damage before the fight, make it hard for them to walk up. I like the ult here, it's fine. I wouldn't necessarily go for the Ram with the ult. Why? Because the Ram isn't very killable. I would prefer you to go for the Juno because the Juno has way less HP and she's already like half health as well. How do I swap to you? And the reason why we're dead is simply because we're in a bad position without our fade. And again, you can do the jump at the end of the fade to give yourself like extra distance. Right? So like we don't want to be playing too close or too aggressively when we don't have our fade, because that's our get out of jail free card. So I like that you were doing damage. You just got too aggressive when you had no fade. Okay, nice. Good damage up. Nice. You got like a couple of hot charge from that. Nice. Now, yes, you can't do damage from like afar, right? But like you can send down a couple of damage orbs, waiting for your team to get back, because by the time you get back to the fight, you're gonna have orbs anywhere, or you're gonna have it off cooldown. Like here, the Iris is in, and you have your orb. In this situation, you kind of just have to stay here and shoot, because you need to help put on pressure. Bro, your damage orb is doing more than you. You didn't shoot. You didn't shoot, man. Again, you see how everyone is looking at the Orisa. You could just walk as far forward as you want, because no one is paying attention to you. Like it doesn't matter if there's 3 people here and it feels dangerous. It's not dangerous if no one's looking. You see how every person is looking at the Orisa? It is your responsibility to walk forward and shoot the enemies. It is your responsibility to walk forward, shoot Mercy, shoot Juno. I don't really give a fuck who. It's your responsibility to do this. But instead, you see how we're just in the back, not really doing anything. We're just hoping that our team does stuff. That's not how we're gonna win. And you only killed the Mercy because you actually used a damage orb, which is good, right? But you would have killed her and probably Juno a lot faster if you had walked forward with the Orisa and shot them. And then look, worst case scenario, right? So like you're scared that they're gonna kill you, okay? Worst case scenario. We walk forward, and then they turn to look at us. Oh no, I just fade out. That's it. When you have fade, you have nothing to be scared of, right? You see, the Pharah got you low. You just faded out. Like it doesn't matter. Now yes, you got flanked by the junk, but you see how it doesn't matter if they get you low, because you just fade out. Oh, shit on. That's where a healing orb could have helped there, because I mean, there's not really a lot you can do. And then here, you see how they're putting a bunch of pressure on. You see how the Pharah's on the right side putting on pressure as you're walking up. You have to use cooldowns just to reach the point, so that by the time you reach the point, you're not going to have all of your cooldowns. This is what you should have been doing for the past couple of times. Good kill. Ah, you walked into the trap. This Loki probably could have been winnable if you didn't walk into that trap. As I watched them. Yeah, you lose. Okay. Well, Miss Satan, I believe your name is. Very, very simple stuff for you. I simply want you to do more damage. Just have the mindset of asking yourself, okay, where can I just do damage? Right? There's two places I want you to think about doing damage more. One, just in general before the fight. Because if you're not doing damage before the fight, you're not going to be able to force out any resources and cooldowns, which is going to make the enemies, back up and stuff, which is going to allow your team to go forward. And 2, I want you to really think about, okay, after the fight's finished and I've won, where can I walk forward to try and do some damage without putting myself in a vulnerable position? Very, 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 very quickly, on this point, right, you win the fight. What you can do is go literally over here. It's completely safe as long as you back up in time. You can throw damage orbs as the enemies come up. This is going to get you ult charge. You're going to force out cooldowns. You might get a kill. Blah blah blah. So number one, I want you to get into the mindset of doing more damage, which is going to lead into the next 2 things. Issue number 2. It's not that prevalent, and you only did it a couple of times, but it's something that happens. Sometimes you fade in or go on an angle too early before your team is ready. And that causes you to lose the fight really quickly. Now, the way you fix this is just look at your team. Is my team close to the enemy team? And is my team and the enemy team actually shooting each other and fighting? If the answer is yes, and they're fighting and they're actually close, then you can split on an angle. If the answer is no, and your team is kind of far away, or maybe your team is close, but like the enemies are here, your team is here, you're not fighting yet, you're just kind of poking, then probably don't go on too deep of an angle. So that's your timing problem. And then your third issue is I don't remember your third issue. I had it in my head and I don't remember. Um, hmm. I'm actually super annoyed. I don't know. You know what? We'll just stick with those two. So your two main problems are that you don't do enough damage, and sometimes you go in too early. Sometimes you actually take good angles, and you should keep doing that. Like there was some cases where you faded into the Farah. There was there was a time on this point where you had the ult. Those were good. And the only reason you got those kills was because you did damage. So you need to do more damage like before and during the fight and after the fight. And then to work on your timing, just make sure you're paying attention to where your team is and listening out for visual and audio cues. Other than that, you know, I think you've got potential to rank up, Miss Satan. Hope this is helpful.